Welcome back to Social Impact Live, and specifically our series on how to get started creating social change. I'm your host, Darrell Coleman, and this is the fifth and final episode in this specific series. I want to dive in today to that fifth step that you should be taking, but let me recap real quick what the first four steps were for you so that you understand sort of how this one builds on top of those. If you haven't seen the previous episodes though, I would recommend going back and watching them. They're not very long, but they do give you the step-by-step process that you should be walking through as you begin to create social change in the world. All right, so starting at the beginning, step one of the process that I told you in creating social change was to really begin with research. Make sure that you understand as much about the space that you're operating in as possible. Step two was develop empathy. Go and be in proximity, work next to and work with the people that you want to serve in order to understand more of the nuances of their life, the situation that they're in, the challenges they face, their hopes, their dreams, their worries, their joys, etc. The step three in the process was to really, based on all that information that you've gained, that you've learned, and by being in collaboration with those that you want to serve, define a very specific challenge, problem that you want to face. I talked about how there are all sorts of challenges in the world. Many of them are global challenges. They're the things that we see on the news or that we think about frequently. They have names like poverty or homelessness, but those are not the specific challenges that need to be addressed. What I'm saying ultimately is not that those aren't the things that we need to solve, but that poverty and homelessness look different for different people in different locations, and you need to understand how to specifically name the challenge that the person and the people that you're working to serve are facing. Step three in the process is once you've done that, once you have real people who you know who have that challenge, once you've done your research, once you've defined the problem specifically, it's time to finally start coming up with ideas for how you're actually going to address it. And I noted that this is actually the fourth phase in what I'm telling you about, the fourth step in this process for you, but it's often the one that we want to jump right into as soon as we learn about a problem. You probably came into social impact work or the desire to do this work with ideas already for how you could address that problem. And what I'm saying to you is make sure you've gathered the information and very specifically define the problem that you want to solve by building it off of that information before you jump into coming up with ideas. So those are our first four steps, and today we're talking about the fifth step in this process. And the fifth step of this process is to prototype something and test it. For those of you who are familiar with a specific process that I often use called design thinking, this will sound somewhat familiar. We've been following the design thinking process as we've been going through these first five steps. But hopefully I've broken it down for you so it's a lot more actionable and clear and specific to the challenge that you're facing. So your fifth step is to prototype and test. And what does that really mean? Well, it means you have all these ideas, right, that you've come up with, things that hopefully are generated based on the real world conditions that you've seen in the location and with the people who you'd like to serve. But so far, all of those ideas are theoretical. They're things that live in your head. You're not sure if they're actually going to make the impact that you want them to make. You're not sure of how people will actually respond to them. And so prototyping and testing gives you an opportunity to figure out whether that's true. So what you want to do is you want to say, okay, well, I've got a group of ideas, the things that I've come up with. Which of these ideas do I think will have the greatest impact, could have the greatest impact? And you want to figure out what is the smallest version of that idea that I could then put into effect, that I could initiate in order to test its outcome. And actually get feedback from those who I am seeking to serve to understand whether it works or not. All right. So that's what you want to think about doing, and ideally you want to do that in deep collaboration with those whom you're serving. Let me give you an example of what this could look like if you were running a specific social impact initiative. Let's imagine that your vision was to provide free breakfast to every person in a given location because you notice that a lot of people are going without breakfast and it's affecting their day, right? I'm making this example up as we go. If your goal was to provide free breakfast to everyone in a given location, that was the idea that you came up with because of the conversations you had with people. People told you that that was a real challenge for them. You talked to individuals, you know their names. Sharon mentioned that that was something that really decided the outcomes of her day, whether it was going to be a good day or a bad day. She's spending a whole lot of time, trying to apply for a job, and not having breakfast in the morning is something that's really challenging for her. So let's imagine that were the issue. If that were the case, your prototype would be actually finding one person or a few people and providing breakfast for those few individuals for some period of time to understand the impact that initiative could actually have on their lives. Does it really make a difference? Does it really move the needle? Does it really do something to affect the outcomes that they experience? Right? That's the type of small scale test that you want to put in place. And that concept is really associated with something called an MVP, a minimum viable product. On the last episode, I started to talk a little bit about this, about what your goal is as you get through this 5th stage. But really, you're looking to frame up what your minimum viable version of a solution is so that you can understand what needs to be scaled over time. So if you're testing a free breakfast program, you're going to want to test that out with a small number of people to start with, to understand what works, what's scalable, what needs to change, what didn't work. And then you can start asking all sorts of questions about the sustainability of what it is that you're creating. So often we get wrapped up in the sustainability question too early. We want to build something that's infinitely scalable, and so we think, well, I have to do this, and I have to contact that organization, and how am I going to get funding, and how am I going to hire people, and where am I going to get volunteers from, and all of these things. But in reality, the first step for you is to really understand whether the idea that you have is going to work in any way, shape, or form, and ideally to do that in direct collaboration with the people that you want to serve so that you can understand and you can see the impacts of it, but you can also mitigate the downside of offering something for a little while and then just pulling it away. By being in community with the people that you want to serve, by having conversations about what this is, by having conversations about how long this is going to last, by talking through the different challenges and the different ways of approaching that, you can then gain a better understanding of what's going to happen and what the results mean of your test, but you can also reduce some of the negative outcomes associated with, again, offering a service and then pulling it away. I'm a really big believer in this. I'm a really big believer in this idea of small scale pilots, of this model of prove it, right? We have all these theories about how to create change in the world. We have all these theories about what we think will work, but in the end, the only things that are going to survive are the things that are proven. And so I say to you, as you do your work, can you prove what the outcomes of your model will be by doing it on a really small scale? Hopefully, that allows you to see where there's potential and where there's not. Hopefully, that keeps the cost of your work down as you try to figure out what's going to be the best approach overall. And hopefully it produces real results in the real world that you can actually begin to scale up after that. All right? So those are the first 5 steps for how to begin creating social change. And I'm going to recap them one more time for you. First is research, so you can understand the problem. Second is empathy, and being in community with those that you want to serve, so you can understand the problem, but you can also understand the people. You can learn their specific names. You can have people that you can actually talk to and call about this issue rather than theorizing about imaginary people. Step 3 is that you're going to define the problem very specifically so you know what you're solving, for whom you're solving it, where you're solving it. Step 4 is you're going to come up with ideas for how to address it. Ideally, you come up with those ideas while working with and in collaboration with the people that you want to serve so that they're always part of the process. And then step 5 is prototype and test. So you're going to come up with an idea and then you're going to actually implement it on some small scale. That might be a 1-week test, it might be a month-long test. It's up to you to decide that. But you have to ask yourself, what is going to demonstrate what works? What timeline do I need for that to actually happen? What scale, what partners, etc. And usually the answer is you need less scale than you think you do. All right? So those are our first 5 steps. If this is an exciting process to you, if that was useful for you, if you find, man, that's really helpful for helping me think about how I should approach starting my social impact journey, but I really want more. I want more structure. I want more resources. I want guides to help me have those conversations with people whom I've never met before. I want a guide for how to do research. I want a guide for how to come up with ideas. I want a guide for my prototyping and testing process. I want more explanation demonstration of how I would actually do that and the different types of prototypes I could build, if you're saying to yourself, I really want more, this was great, but I want more, then you're in luck, because at the bottom of the screen here is the URL, dcdesignuniversity.com. Everything that I've talked to you about here over the last 5 episodes is gone into in more depth in our course, Design Thinking Fundamentals for Social Change. Design Thinking Fundamentals for Social Change teaches social innovators how to create their first impact in the world in the lives of 1 to 3 people. It talks about the minimum effective dose. What is the minimum unit, the smallest unit of social change, and what do you need to do to actually scale that up over time? So that's where we end up at the end of the course, is starting with making your first impact, getting all the way through that. You will have made your first impact by the end, and then you will have a roadmap for how you build on top of that. From there are videos throughout the entire thing that guide you along the way, and I bring in examples from innovators throughout history who have used this process or parts of this process to create really impactful solutions for humankind. So you'll have really a profound wealth of inspiration that you can pull on, as well as examples from my own work at DC Design, redesigning our criminal justice and foster care and education and healthcare system. All right, so that's what I've got for you today. If you're interested in that course, head over to dcdesignuniversity.com, click on Design Thinking Fundamentals for Social Change, and you can sign up there, and you can go deeper into all of these concepts. That's what I've got for you today. I will see you tomorrow on another episode of Social Impact Live.